Today we'll be talking about the legendary wide receiver Calvin Johnson, aka Megatron. Calvin Johnson was raised in South Atlanta, Georgia, but was actually born in Newman, Georgia on September 29th, 1985. Johnson attended Sandy Creek High School in Tyrone, Georgia, where he was a very good football and baseball player. He had grown to 6'4" as a sophomore, and that's when he really began to take off. His sophomore year, he racked in 34 receptions for 646 yards and 10 touchdowns, and his junior year reeled in 40 passes for 736 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was rated a 5-star by Scout and a 4-star by Rivals. He was ranked the 37th overall prospect nationally and had offers from Georgia, Miami, and Notre Dame. But when it came down to it, he chose Georgia Tech, which would be a great decision. He would get immediate action as a freshman. He caught 48 passes for 837 yards and 7 TDs. He was the leading wide receiver that year at Georgia Tech and a first-team All-Atlantic Coast Conference selection, and was named ACC Rookie of the Year. He would only continue to grow from there. His sophomore year, he caught 54 passes for 888 yards and 6 touchdowns, and senior year would catch 76 passes for 1,202 yards and 15 touchdowns, which was a record at Georgia Tech. So in college, as a total, he grabbed 178 catches, 2,927 yards, and 28 touchdowns. He broke 6 Georgia Tech records, including receiving yards for a career, receiving yards for a single season, receiving touchdowns for a career and single season, 100-yard games in a career, and 100-yard games in a single season. He was also a 2-time All-American, 3-time All-Conference player, ACC Player of the Year, and Biletnikoff Award winner, which is the best wide receiver in college football. Calvin was easily a top pick in the NFL draft. With his 6'4" frame and electric speed, he couldn't be denied. And when the Lions' second pick came around, they took no chances. Calvin began his career a bit rocky at Detroit, where he would have 756 yards and 4 touchdowns his rookie year, and had a pretty bad dropping problem. His sophomore year is where he really took off, where he grabbed 1,331 yards and 12 touchdowns, where he became known as Megatron, and he wasn't even in his prime yet. It wasn't until 2011 where Calvin would go on to have one of the best 3 seasons in NFL history for a wide receiver. One of those seasons, he had the NFL single-season receiving yard record of 1,964 yards, which is still yet to be broken. After those 3 years, Calvin would start to regress, though. This was due to what a lot of people thought was a mix of Lions always losing and Calvin's consistent injuries. And people were right, as in 2015, Calvin would hang it up at age 30. Many people thought Calvin could have easily played 4, maybe even 5 more years, considering he had gone under 1,000 since his rookie season. But this was a very tough decision for Johnson, as it was likely due because of a lot of his injury problems and just the demoralizing aspect of playing for the Lions during this time was. Even though he retired early, though, he still had absurd career stats and accolades. He finished with 731 receptions for 11,619 yards and 83 touchdowns. He was a 3-time first-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, 2-time receiving yard leader, and 1-time reception leader. He was also a part of the 2010s All-Decade team and was inducted into the Pride of the Lions and was introduced into the NFL Hall of Fame in 2021, solidifying him as one of the greatest to ever do it. After Calvin retired, he had a pretty bad relationship with the Lions, not wanting anything to do with them, in fact. This was due to the Lions not allowing him to come back to the game. You see, Calvin was still under contract with Detroit for the first few years of his retirement. It was reported that the Patriots wanted to bring Calvin back in, but the Lions did not allow this, causing Calvin to be pretty upset with Detroit. Fast forward to these days, Johnson is no stranger to the organization. He makes annual appearances at training camp, texts with current players, introduced himself to the new guys, and goes to games, and even narrated the Sunday Night Football intro for the Lions' first game of the season this year. Calvin continues to impact the game today as many players look up to Megatron as one of the greatest to ever do it.